Who is he, the man who built one of America's most eccentric palaces, and why is his story almost forgotten? In 1891, 33-year-old Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont, heir to a banking empire, undertook a task that most considered insane: to build on 3 acres of land in the city of Newport, Rhode Island, a summer house palace in which the first floor would not house living rooms, but stables, and only the second would be residential. It seemed impossible. The new castle was meant to be a triumph of wealth, power, and taste, but 50 to 60 years later it turned into a heavy burden, an object of almost complete dilapidation. Today, few know how glory turned into ruins and how ambitions became a trial. Belmont did not start as a nobleman aristocrat. He was a typical representative of the American bourgeoisie of the late 19th century, an heir to capital, striving not merely for wealth, but for social significance. He dreamed rather not of being one of many, but of remaining one of the few. In his plans, not just a summer cottage, but a structure that declares, "We are here, we matter." But he didn't just want to appear. He wanted to be different, not in a palace like the old aristocracy, but in a kind of architectural provocation, where stables and carriages become part of the aesthetic. No one knew then that the main character of his story was creating not just a house, but an image that would later become a symbol of the irony of success. Introducing his action, we immediately see the contrast: a humble beginning, an heir to a banking dynasty, grandeur, a chateau house on 3 acres overlooking Bellevue Avenue, obscurity. Today, most pass by this place without understanding its history. World fame. No, the story did not become a legend. It passed unnoticed. And yet tragedy is inevitable. What was meant to be the pinnacle of success turns into a trial, criticism, decline. From this moment, the question arises: why did power wealth not protect this place from decay? Why did the house, a symbol of victory, become a symbol of failure? Our first hero, Oliver Belmont, a noble dreamer strategist, he sees what others do not want to see, but acts with his own means. And the house he creates, not merely residential, but a mirror of his psychology, a mirrored imprint of ambitions. Entering this story, we already understand. This is not just a story about a house. This is a story about how success can become a trap. And that is why we must remain with this question: how did it happen that all this turns into ruins? To understand why the story of Belcourt, as Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont's mansion was called, became a symbol of the irony of fate, one must return to its roots. He was born in New York in 1859 into the family of August Belmont, a German Jewish banker, one of the creators of the Rothschild family's financial power in the United States. His mother, Caroline Slidell Perry, came from the old naval Perry family, relatives of the legendary Commodore Matthew Perry, who opened Japan to the West. It was a union of new money and an old name, and it was in this blend the entire philosophy of Belcourt's future owner. From his youth, Oliver absorbed the idea that origin does not grant the right to recognition. His father was the wealthiest man in New York, but the society of old families living on Fifth Avenue looked upon the German financier with cold disdain. These people did not consider him one of their own. Oliver understood early. To be accepted, it was not enough to possess wealth. One needed to possess a symbol that expressed the power of taste, intellect, and origin simultaneously. That is why he did not merely strive to copy luxury, but wanted to create an aesthetic declaration, a new style of American grandeur. Oliver was educated at Harvard, but his character was far from academic discipline. He was impulsive, passionate, with refined taste, a little eccentric. He served in the cavalry, participated in public life, but most importantly, he possessed a rare ability to combine European cultural sophistication and American business determination. Even then, in the late 1870s, he formulated for himself the idea that a house is not just a dwelling, but a personal manifesto. His philosophy was that success should not just be seen, but understood. He wrote in one of his letters, the quote is taken from correspondence preserved in the Belmont family archive, "A house should not be explained, it should speak for itself." This thought would become his guiding principle. The first thing he encountered was resistance from his environment. His family belonged to the new American wealthy, who had acquired capital through railroads, banks, and investments. But Newport at the end of the 19th century was the arena of old families, the Vanderbilts, Astors, Morgans, those who had already established themselves as the aristocracy of the New World. For them, Belmont was an outsider, too new, too flamboyant, too audacious. It was this opposition, new money versus old, that would define his life's philosophy. He wanted to prove that culture and intellect cannot belong only to heirs of titles. In 1891, he hired the young but already renowned architect Richard Morris Hunt, the man who built for the Vanderbilts their grandiose estate, the Breakers, to create something different. Not an imitation, but a challenge. Hunt proposed a project in the style of 15th century French Gothic, inspired by the Loire Valley Chateau, Chambord. But the main thing was the idea of a functional reversal, to make the lower floor a home for horses and the upper one for people. This choice was not merely an eccentricity. It reflected Oliver's world view. In his eyes, the horse was a symbol of strength, movement, chivalry, that which was lacking in modern man. A house where stables become the center was meant to embody honor, order, and the spirit of the old world, transposed into new America. Thus, Belmont's philosophy took shape. It was architecture as a statement against snobbery, as an affirmation of the dignity of action, not origin. By the end of the 90s, his concept had solidified into an idea: to build a mansion that connects the old spirit of chivalry with the new possibilities of American capital. This was his first strategy, not to buy recognition, but to create it through a symbol. And this symbol was meant to be a house where every stone speaks of his convictions. Thus began the story of Belcourt, not just a building, but the architectural philosophy of a man who tried to connect two worlds. And it is in this connection the key to understanding why his fate would turn into drama. For Oliver Belmont, the house was not a refuge, but a manifesto. It is precisely this conviction that would become both the source of his fame and the beginning of his end. The turning point in Oliver Belmont's fate occurred at the moment when his life intersected with a woman whose name itself became a symbol of the American era. In 1906, he married Alva Vanderbilt, the widow of William Kissam Vanderbilt, heir to a railroad empire, and one of the most influential men in the United States. This union became not merely a marriage, it was a clash of two worlds, old money and new ambitions. Alva was 43 years old, Oliver, 47. She was a woman with a reputation as a brilliant hostess, a patron of the arts, and simultaneously, one of the most independent figures of her time. After a scandalous divorce from Vanderbilt, the first of its kind among the American elite, she found herself in the position of an outcast from high society. For her, marriage with Belmont was an opportunity to find not only personal affection, but also a new identity. For him, a chance to become part of the circle that had never recognized him throughout his life. Their union was both a strategy and love simultaneously. Belmont took on the role of protector, while Alva brought scale and influence into his life. She possessed wealth, taste, and, most importantly, a sense of mission. Her idea was that wealth should serve social progress, and not merely be a display of power. It was under her influence that Belmont began to re-evaluate his creation, Belcourt. Initially, the house was conceived as a private residence for horseback riding and social gatherings, but now it was meant to become a space that combines aesthetics, art, and intellect. She saw in it not merely a symbol of chivalry, but a living monument to America's cultural transformation. Collections of medieval art, stained glass windows, and furniture brought from Europe began to appear in Belcourt. The stained glass windows were commissioned from masters in Chartres, the fireplaces were made in France, and the marble for the stairs was delivered from Italy. The house became a place where two eras met, past and future. This period precisely became the peak of their public influence. The couple hosted receptions where politicians, writers, and artists gathered. Within the walls of Belcourt, conversations echoed about women in society, about the future of architecture, about how America should learn to create not just wealth, but culture. The house lived and breathed the philosophy of two strong individuals. But within this idyll, an internal conflict was already beginning to grow. Oliver Belmont, though fascinated by the idea of aesthetic heritage, remained a man of action and control. Alva, on the other hand, yearned for freedom, for the space they created to live independently of themselves. Their views on the meaning of wealth began to diverge. It was then that Belcourt definitively took shape as a marriage of two worlds. The lower floor, a sanctuary of masculine power, stables and carriage halls, where bronze coexisted with oak and the scent of leather. The upper floor, Alva's territory, refined, imbued with light and music. She redecorated rooms, added mirrors, silk wallpaper, French chandeliers. Thus the house became a mirror of their union. Below, strength and order; above, spirit and beauty. In 1912, Belmont was elected to Congress from the state of New York. His influence grew, and Belcourt became a symbol not merely of luxury, but of intellect. He often told journalists that architecture is the biography of stone. This was entirely him, a rational romantic, a man who built not for fame, but for an idea. This rise, however, was his last. Just 3 years later, in 1915, he died of pneumonia, leaving Alva a widow for the second time. The house, which had been a symbol of their union, became for her both a temple of remembrance and a trial. She would preserve it, but over time, she would begin to see in it not only beauty, but also a burden. Thus concluded the phase of ascent, when two worlds, having united, created something grand. But in the history of Belcourt, this was only the middle of the journey. Ahead lay the flourishing of grandeur, which would inevitably be followed by a fall. And the house, built as a symbol of strength, would become a mirror of loneliness. When one enters Belcourt, even today, more than a century later, there arises a feeling as if one is crossing the boundary between two civilizations. The house stands on Bellevue Avenue, a street where every late 19th century villa is a display of wealth. But Belcourt was different. It did not scream of luxury. It declared order, ritual, and honor. The first thing that greets a guest is the enormous gates, copied from a French Loire chateau, bearing Belmont's coat of arms, in which two symbols intersected, a knight's helmet and an American eagle. Beyond them lies a courtyard paved with granite, where 25 thoroughbred horses once stood. On the first floor are the stables, finished with carved oak and bronze, with polished granite floors and decorative panels crafted according to the sketches of architect Richard Morris Hunt. Each stall was adorned with a copper plaque bearing the horse's name, and the ventilation was arranged so that the scent of leather and hay was barely noticeable. Here, everything appeared as a ceremony. Even the space for animals adhered to the aesthetic of a chivalric order. The horses were part of the house, not inferior to its inhabitants, but rather an extension of the owner's will. Among the lower-level rooms, the carriage hall stood out, a long gallery where carriages and silver-inlaid harnesses were kept. In the evenings, Belmont himself would descend there to watch the servants prepare the horses for a night ride. Eyewitness accounts describe how, in the lamplight, copper gleamed and reflections shimmered on the marble walls. "It seemed like a temple of movement," wrote one guest in Harper's Weekly in 1895. Ascending the wide staircase to the second floor, a visitor entered a completely different world. If below bronze and stone reigned, then above, silk, brocade, and light. The main hall, a two-story gallery with ceilings over 10 meters high, adorned with wood carvings and stained glass windows depicting scenes from the life of St. George. Light, filtering through the colored glass, painted the walls in deep purple and golden tones. Every morning, sunbeams created a play of reflections, as if reminding one of the eternal change of power and the fragility of human glory. From the hall, one could enter the library, the master's most personal room. It housed over 2,000 volumes, from Dante's Divine Comedy to technical treatises on steam engines. Belmont believed that intellect and engineering should not be separated. In this room, as contemporaries wrote, he could spend hours discussing politics and architecture, gazing at a bronze globe placed in the center. On the walls, engravings depicting Loire chateaux and Gothic cathedrals. Everything in this space spoke of the desire to combine the chivalric ideal with modern progress. Nearby was the music room, created at Alva's insistence. A French era grand piano stood there, around which musicians and guests gathered. The ceiling was painted with motifs from The Song of Roland, and the carpets were woven in Aubusson. This part of the house resonated, not only with music, but also with conversations about freedom, art, and the place of women in society. Here, Alva hosted discussions, inviting female writers, reformers, and artists. In total, the house contained 28 living spaces, 13 fireplaces, and 8 staircases. Its area exceeded 40,000 square feet. Construction took 4 years and cost $600,000, an amount equivalent to several decades of labor for hundreds of workers. But every dollar here had meaning. It became an element of an idea. If one descends from the gallery into the corridors leading to the bedrooms, one can feel the transition from public to private. Alva's rooms were flooded with light and decorated with pink curtains and gilded mirrors. Her boudoir featured a portrait by John Singer Sargent, one of the last painted by the artist for private clients. In contrast, Oliver's bedroom was austere. Oak panels, a fireplace with the family crest, an armchair by a window overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. 2 perspectives, 2 worlds, 2 characters. Belcourt's architecture is psychology carved in stone. The lower floor spoke of discipline and strength, the upper of beauty and creation. The house reflected an internal dialogue between action and contemplation, between power and meaning. Everything in it was a juxtaposition: the coldness of stone and the warmth of fabric, the gleam of metal and the softness of light, the noise of the street and the silence of the gallery. In the early 20th century, Belcourt became a symbol of aesthetic revival. Journalists, architects, philosophers visited it. Some saw madness in it, others revelation. But almost all agreed. In this house, the character of a man who wanted to connect eras was revealed. And yet, even then, beneath the arches of the halls, a shadow lurked. The higher Belmont ascended, the more the house became an extension of him, and the more vulnerable he himself became. For everything he built depended on one thing, on the belief that wealth could be an expression of spirit. And soon, this belief would face a trial that no stone symbol would survive. Oliver Belmont's death in 1915 was the first blow, after which Belcourt slowly began to transform from a living symbol into a silent monument. He was only 56. The illness, pneumonia, developed rapidly. Alva was left alone in the enormous house, where every room now echoed his voice. She continued to live in Belcourt, but gradually the walls, once filled with meaning, began to remind her of an invisible separation. Outside, the world was changing. World War I destroyed old Europe, the very Europe that Oliver had been inspired by. His ideals of chivalry and honor now seemed naive. America was entering an era of pragmatism and machines, and a house where horses were more important than automobiles became an anachronism. For Alva, this was not just a cultural contrast, it was a personal discord with reality. She tried to keep Belcourt alive. She continued to host charity receptions, concerts, and suffragette meetings. She became an active supporter of women's suffrage, participated in political gatherings, and even financed campaigns for social reforms. But increasingly, letters preserved in the archives show her weariness. In one of them, written in 1920, she confessed to a friend, "The house is enormous, and sometimes it seems to live its own life, and I am merely a guest in it." This period became an internal tragedy. Outside, grandeur, marble, mirrors. Inside, loneliness, a quiet struggle with the shadow of the past. Everything that had been created for the sake of a symbol of strength now became a symbol of loss. She began to close off rooms, stopped holding receptions, confining herself to the upper floor. No horses stood in the stables anymore. Only the scent of wood and dust recalled the days when life here buzzed. Alva never hid the fact that her relationship with her husband was complicated. He was a controlling man, she freedom-seeking. After his death, she seemed to gain this freedom, but along with it, emptiness. The house, which had been their dialogue, became a monologue without him. And the more she tried to hold on to it, the more she felt it consuming her. In 1928, Belcourt was opened to the public for the first time, partially as a gallery. This decision was twofold. On the one hand, she continued her husband's mission to showcase beauty as a value. On the other, she admitted that she could no longer be its sole guardian. The house became a space between past and future, between memory and oblivion. The moral conflict intensified. Could she, the widow of one of America's wealthiest men, allow herself weakness? Society expected grandeur from her, but grandeur turned into a burden. She understood that the ideals Oliver lived for, dignity, order, honor, sounded ironic in the post-war world. And yet she preserved his house like a sacred promise, though inside she increasingly wondered, for what purpose? In her last years, she appeared less and less in society. Visitors recalled how she slowly walked through the gallery, illuminated only by the soft light from the stained glass windows. Her figure dissolved into the twilight, as if she herself became part of the architecture. This was the moment when person and house became inseparable. Belcourt ceased to be just a building and transformed into a metaphor for fate. Alva died in 1933. With her passing, the house was left without a soul, and then began what seems to be the law of nature for such places: decay. The horse halls gathered dust, the silk draperies faded, the marble cracked. During the Great Depression, maintaining the mansion became impossible. Belcourt, once a symbol of strength and taste, was unwanted by anyone. Townspeople passed by, not recognizing in it the palace built with a dream of eternity. Thus ended the era of grandeur and began the century of decline. But before the house finally plunged into silence, it was destined to become the arena of a new transformation, no longer of luxury, but of redemption. And it is in this that the greatest irony of this story lies. Even ruins can speak louder than palaces. By the 1930s, Belcourt stood like a giant without owners. The house, created as a symbol of eternity, was unprepared for the economic reality of the new era. After Alva Belmont's death, the heirs were unwilling or unable to maintain it. The Great Depression, which ravaged America, destroyed many fortunes, but even more profoundly, it destroyed illusions. Luxury was no longer perceived as a virtue, and if Belcourt had once been a manifesto of will, it now became a reproach. a reminder of a world where everything was measured by splendor. During these years, the house changed hands several times. It was bought to be resold, turned into a tourist curiosity, a club, even an exhibition space for antiques. Once, in the 1950s, someone proposed converting it into an automobile museum, in ironic contrast to the fact that horses once lived here. However, every attempt to bring the house back to life proved temporary. Stone, wood, and glass seemed to resist new meaning. Gradually, by mid-century, Belcourt fell into disrepair. Wooden panels darkened from humidity, stained glass windows cracked, and some marble slabs were removed. Dust settled on the books in the library, like time on the ideals of their owner. The phrase began to appear in Newport newspapers: the curse of luxury, oblivion. But this was not mysticism, merely a social truth. America was entering an age of consumption, and no house, however beautiful, could remain a temple of the spirit in a world of pragmatism. And yet, not everyone forgot. In the 1960s, a group of restorers showed interest in Belcourt, seeing in it a unique example of a transitional architectural style, from Gothic to modern. That's when the first attempt to re-evaluate it began. One architectural historian, Richard Geyer, wrote, "This house is a document of an era when wealth tried to speak the language of ideals. These words became a kind of epitaph for Belmont, but also a new beginning. Over time, tours, lectures, and small exhibitions began to be held in the house. And although its walls still bore traces of decay, something else was palpable in the air, as if the past had begun to breathe again." This was less a revival than a purification. The story of Belcourt began to sound like a parable about how ambitions turn into legacy and pride into a lesson. The most astonishing thing happened at the end of the 20th century. In the 90s, Belcourt was purchased by a collector and enthusiast who decided to restore its original appearance. His name was Harold Matthews, and he saw in the house not ruins, but a living text. A long restoration began. Old beams were reinforced, stained glass windows were restored according to archival photographs, and the library was once again filled with books. Workers found letters and blueprints left by architects behind the panels, and this discovery gave the restoration an almost archaeological character. But the true revival happened in the 21st century. In 2013, Belcourt was acquired by Newport antique dealer Eric Rosenfeld, known for his historical preservation projects. He didn't just restore the building, he restored its meaning. Under his leadership, the house became not a museum or a residence, but a place where past and present meet in dialogue. Concerts, exhibitions, and theatrical readings are held. Thus, Belcourt passed through crisis and was reborn. From a symbol of power, it became a symbol of memory. From a personal manifesto, a public heritage. What was once built as an assertion of individual strength transformed into a reminder of the power of culture. If Oliver Belmont strived to prove that wealth could be a form of art, then now history has proven the opposite. Only art can save wealth from oblivion. And in this lies the true transformation. The house, built for eternity, indeed became eternal, but not thanks to stone, but thanks to the meaning it acquired a century later. And yet, a final question remains, one that lingers with everyone who enters these halls. What, in essence, does the story of Belcourt teach us? The answer will be given in the last chapter, when ruins turn into a lesson and a house becomes a mirror of time. Today, standing in Belcourt's central gallery, where the stained glass windows once again glow with the fire of the setting sun, it's impossible not to feel a strange presence, as if the walls remember the breath of their creators. Every crack, every scratch on the stone, every nuance in the old oak speaks of the time that has passed through this place. The house, built out of vanity, lived a life worthy of a human. Youth, brilliant, maturity, proud, old age, tragic, and finally a quiet rebirth. What once seemed a rich man's private whim became a symbol of a deeper process, how America sought its identity through architecture. In the 19th century, houses like Belcourt were an attempt by a young nation to prove its capacity for grandeur equal to Europe. But over time, these stone manifestos lost their original meaning and became mirrors in which one could see not only the strength, but also the vulnerability of a culture founded on wealth. The restoration of Belcourt in the 21st century was not merely a technical task, but an act of moral redemption. Within this process was something almost religious. To restore meaning is to restore a soul. New owners, historians, artists, and craftsmen saw in this house not a monument to luxury, but a testament to the human striving for harmony. They tried not to recreate the past literally, but to restore its breath. Today, its halls host chamber concerts, art lectures, and documentary film screenings. In the stables, where Oliver Belmont's horses once stood, there are now exhibitions on crafts and architecture. On the second floor, an exhibition dedicated to Alva Belmont herself, her struggle for women's rights. The silence of the house has been filled with new voices, voices of art, science, and public consciousness. Every visitor, stepping onto the marble floor of the main hall, undergoes the same internal transformation that its owners once did. You see how beauty becomes a trial, how power dissolves into silence, how time transforms the private into the public. And at this moment, you begin to understand that Belcourt is not just a historical monument. It is a living allegory of the human journey, from the desire to possess to the ability to understand. If you close your eyes, you can imagine a young Oliver's figure reflected in one of the windows. He stands by the parapet, gazing into the distance where the ocean merges with the sky. Behind him, Alva's soft footsteps are heard. Both of them, like characters from a legend, frozen in a moment between glory and silence. Their house survived because it contained not only wealth but also a dream, imperfect but authentic. And perhaps that is precisely why Belcourt is perceived today not as a relic of an era, but as its reminder. It teaches us not to condemn the past, but to understand it. It reminds us that luxury without an idea is dead, and an idea without form is incorporeal, and that the true value of any creation lies in how well it can outlive its creator. Now, as the evening light fades in the stained glass windows and long shadows glide across the marble floor, the house once again settles into peace. The breath of the past still lives within it, but it does not weigh heavily. It inspires. Belcourt outlived time, outlived its owners, outlived oblivion. And now it has finally found what its creator so desperately sought: immortality, not in stone, but in memory.